Hello and welcome to the first CTO talk of this year. My name is Fatulescu. I'm Chief Platform Officer at Pentalog, meaning I'm in charge with the products and the technology strategy of the group. And I'm very, very happy to have here with us today another great CTO from a great company, Made.com, particularly that company that builds great design, great quality at affordable and makes it affordable for us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Geert. Geert, please join us and say a few words about you.
Thank you, Cornel. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Geert Engels. I'm the CTO at Made.com. You may know us as a furniture, homewares retailer brand in Europe. A few words about myself, maybe. So by education, I'm a computer scientist of a quite academic, theoretical persuasion, but I was also the kid who was programming age 14 before they had a computer. I was buying the books and, programming in my head or in the computer shop or whatever. So I've got the nerdiness as well as the theory at the very beginning of my career. I then started working at a few sort of innovative startups in London, in the space of online marketing, e-commerce. Through some acquisitions, ended up with Verizon, which is a very big telecoms company in the US. So I went from being employee number 1 to being employee number 200,000 and a bit, quite an eye-opener. So I did the startup, I did the big corporate. After a few more twists and turns, I ended up at Made about 4 years ago. It's the first time I worked for what I call medium-sized company. So it's a company with some history, more than 10 years, 11, 12, but a very successful history. So it still has that startup mindset, but it's beyond the scale up. We're now a publicly listed business. So it's medium-sized, so you get a lot of resource to do things, but you can still move at pace. I really like that. And it's also the first time I work for a company where technology is neither the product nor the service. It's what makes everything else possible, but it's not what we sell, which is very interesting.
Oh, very interesting background. Very, very happy to have here with you. The same for every CTO talk, lots of questions that we've grouped for you. And if you have questions during this hour, please shoot them on chat. Now I have it largely visible on the screen, so I will see them and interrupt the conversation if needed, so that you get priority. We will start with the first question. The first question. It's always the first question, the same question, and it's about the CTO role. And I think our audience is meant. It's about CTO. So hopefully we have as many as we can. Let's talk about the CTO role. And as we know, there is no clear definition about a CTO role. What's your own definition of a CTO? And if you can say how you define that at Made.com.
Yeah. So I think the CTO pretty much everywhere is torn between two teams. There's at one hand, there's a C part is part of the exec team, and that is your team as a CTO. And the other side is the T side, is the tech team, and that is your team as the CTO. And you play different roles in both teams, but you sit in both of them. And your job is to work between the one and the other, translate, if you like, trade off the long term for the short term, the bigger picture for the detail, the desirable with the possible, all the trade-offs. So I think that's a CTO everywhere, and it's also at Made, also my position.
Okay. You've used the word translate. So can you be a bit more specific about things that you translate usually?
Yeah, I mean that could be anything. I mean, translate in a wide sense. It's not just vocabulary. It is sometimes translating urgency, or the different ways in which things can be urgent or important. It is sometimes summary, right? It's an explanation of an hour, which is very good and valid, which needs to be said in 1 sentence or 1 minute or 3 minutes,
Easy.
depending on the audience and so on, or the other way around. So it's translation in the widest possible sense. It's being part of both worlds and bridging it. That's what I mean by translate.
Okay. During the CTO series about CTO fundamentals, we are talking about partnership between the CTO and the executive officer, the necessary amount of time they need to spend together so that this partnership exists. And that's a very important point of success or failure. So what can you tell us about your partnership with your executive officer?
Yeah, so our CEO, Philippe Chagnon, is my boss, and obviously is my most important stakeholder. It is the one that has the biggest picture possible, which is very important. He's very good at sharing that bigger picture with me, because he sees as part of my role being able to build that mental picture of not just where are we and what's on fire and what needs attention right now, but where do we want to be in 2, 3, 5 years' time. He's feeding me all that information all the time so I can build that picture and make sure that all of those things we have somewhere. We can do it next week or next month or next year or never. But whenever the context changes, he gives me that information. So I think one of the ways that makes it successful is that sort of context shaping that he does. He's also very, very good at giving me priorities. I don't think there is any conversation I have with him where I leave without knowing the top 3 things that I need to be looking at. And that's also super helpful. I think that he finds it helpful that I can listen super carefully and take up not too much of his time, but understand where he's coming from, where he's going to, what's important, what's not important. Part of his style, part of his intuitions, part of having a long history, that helps as well. So it's not necessarily having a lot of time together, it's having had lots of time together over time, over a long history. I think that helps as well.
And in terms
I
of,
think it's one of those.
yeah, please.
I think it's one of those key relationships. CEO, CTO is like product engineering. If they don't not hand in glove, it doesn't work.
And in terms of amount of time that you usually spend with him, is it in we can measure that by hours, by days, by minutes?
It depends. I mean, it depends on the forum and the amount of detail, right? So obviously, in terms of there's one-to-ones, which are very important, but there's a lot of other meetings, forums where he is presiding or he's present, and I'm present as well. And that's another way of spending time together. It's not one-on-one, but it's in the context of a particular team or project or opportunity or threat, or whatever it is. But I would say measure it in hours to days a week.
Wow, hear that, please, audience? It seems important. And we have here quite a successful partnership, we could say. Let's talk a bit about governance, because that's the thing that usually it's everyone's job and nobody's job. And we define the governance as efficiency. So how efficient is what we do? So is governance, first question, governance, is it still relevant for a modern digital business today?
It depends what you mean by it, I guess. Yes, I mean, in a sense, you want, for me, governance is important. I think my job is to ensure that at every stage of the business's growth, and we are growing rapidly and we are going through transformations. We did an IPO last year that made us a different kind of business. For every stage of that growth, we have enough governance, if you like, but not too much. When in doubt, a bit less maybe than you think you need. That is my job, because I want to protect some of that early startup feel that we still have, the creativity, the experimentation, the yes, we can do this kind of attitude. So I think it's governance, but slowly, steadily in line with the growth of the business and its wider context, and in such a way that it is maximally possible decentralized. So devolved, in terms of picking roadmaps. They could be, we're on a journey now to start and instill micro roadmaps from the various teams where they can, based on KPIs that give them direction, build their own sort of roadmap and experimentation about where we can make the improvements in close connection with the business units they support, but also leveraging the microservices architecture that we can have polyglot, poly database. It's not one size fits all. It is as much as possible devolved, because that is the way to scale, to keep scaling, to keep adding people and adding efficiency. And I think we can learn something from the big tech companies. They have solved this problem in different ways. They've solved the problem of scaling, of making tens of thousands of technologists work together. That's the problem, really, getting there slowly. The problem for me, and I don't have the answer, is how do you organize what's left centrally? There are things around security, performance, architecture, and so on, which you can't just devolve entirely. So how do you organize the devolved, streamlined setup, if you like, with central functions about policy and control and so on?
Yeah, are you using particular frameworks existing in the public frameworks that everyone knows, or is it built in-house?
It's built in-house. It's
built in-house. And if you'd have to qualify the scaling organization in terms of methodology and the efficiency of doing that, on a scale for 1 to 5, where 5 is excellent and 1 is, oh, that's so poor, where would you find yourself?
Maybe a 4, maybe we are 4, but the question is, how do we maintain that 4 at the next level? If we become twice as big, can we maintain that 4? That's the question.
How large is the team, the current team that you are managing?
So technology under the CTO is 110 people, more or less. Another 10 maybe in digital experience, so that's product ownership in the front office, and maybe another 10, a bit more in data. So 130 maybe, if you take it really wide.
Oh, that's a small team, huh? Good. And in terms of technologies, can you say a few words about that, just to have a big picture?
Okay, we have our legacy, like everybody else. We have our monoliths that we used to come from, right? We had one system consumer facing and one system back office, connected, XML, RPC, synchronous. That's it. We've been on a journey for 10 years now, trying to loosen that up. So microservices, I would say right-sized microservices, not too small, not too large. I think one of the things that sets us apart is the way we decided early on that the collaboration between the services would work. So we use an event sourcing, event-based communication. Basically, don't store state transitions, right? But we store them in an event database. So it's append only. It's technology called event store underneath, but the tech doesn't matter. The thing is that we settled on this as being the only way. So building up this shared sense of history between services is the only way in which they communicate, by and large, which is very powerful. It's extremely simple, therefore extremely scalable. It's also something that allows us to go back in time and replay those events and extract more information about it, or bootstrap a new service from nothing based on the past and so on. It also gives us a unified way of shipping all those domain events in verbatim to a data lake, where we can mine them then in data. So each service has its own database and private state, but the domain events, the communication between the services, are what we can report on. So that's quite neat. It's not unique to us. I think many banks do this and so on. I think it's unique in the sense that we did it early on and we do it consistently. That gives us advantage.
I've already so many questions about that, but so audience, please feel free to ask your questions so that you don't get just my questions. So before going to the path of questions that I have, would you consider, do you consider event sourcing today and event-driven development like a mandatory for every modern company today, or?
No, it comes with considerable cognitive load. It's not easy to start thinking that way, because when you join us, we will indoctrinate you, and after a while you will think that way, and maybe too much think that way. I think sometimes we've internalized it so much that we sometimes go to it too quickly, where we could have a simple queue or something, AWS, which would be more performant, less overhead, less cognitive overhead, and so on. So it's not for everything, but for us, it works beautifully as a backbone. And so it's an events database as a publish subscribe mechanism, basically.
Yeah. Even if I'd love to debate on that a lot, because that's a very interesting and common topic today. Let's go back to the CTO role. Now, in terms of architecture, what was the role you were playing when this architecture was still at early stages, or maybe even in the first conversations? What did you do? What were the decisions that you were taking, and how much of that was, I know, other people decisions?
Yeah. So I'm not taking credit for the architecture. I joined Made 4 years ago. The architectural track that we're on was set before then. Mm-hmm. So people before me who were really, really good at this kind of thing, who put this in motion, did the first few services, and it worked beautifully. And my job has been to continue that, to continue hiring for this kind of skill, making sure that we use it where appropriate, but also don't overuse it. Like I said, it's a danger of overusing it, and so on. So I'm just in terms of architecture, I've inherited this.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge about, was it the previous CTO or the whole team that decided upon this architecture?
I know the people, so they were still around when I joined. And so I know where they come from. I know what their background is and what they were thinking. If that's what, I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Just to understand if it was one person pushing for the architecture or the teamwork. That's the.
There was one person who was quite inspirational, but he was not I would say he was the inspiration, but he was not the pushy person. He was a person who was very good at getting people to buy in, to nudge them in the right direction, to make them see the benefits and make it a collaborative effort. He was very much aware that it wasn't, I set this in motion, therefore it's mine. He was much better than that.
Okay, so inspirational. That's a very interesting word. And
yes.
We have a question from Jonathan. Can Devolved responsibilities be centrally governed with templates and guide rails? I'm not even sure I understand the questions, but do you? Kurt?
Maybe I do. I'll say a few things, and maybe it's not on topic, but so the way we think about this Devolved responsibility is that we want to replicate some of the organizational principles of big tech in a company like ours, which is not tech and not big, by creating a long-term alignment between specific business units, logistics, merchandising, customer services, and so on, and teams of people, squads, multifunctional squads that have all the skills that they need to take on the work that comes from that unit, and that own their own services independently, so they can make decisions quickly. So the same originator of work to the same team of people to the same services, end-to-end alignment, end-to-end ownership. And we believe the templates around that are in terms of KPIs. So we set the business KPIs for the squad. We make it clear to even the most junior developer what we are trying to achieve with this piece of technology. We make visible to the business people the technical KPIs around total cost of ownership, technical debt, downtime, etc., complexity, operational overheads, cost of hosting, and so on. So we have two sets of KPIs coming together. That is, if you like, the template. The central bit I'm not so clear about is the things where you need to work on kind of reuse, if you like, reusable components, for example, front-end components between different services. How do you manage that? The pieces around policy setting, or the pieces around, say, security posture, and so on. That's, I don't know if your question is about that, but I think it's different for different teams. Different teams have a different user interface, if you like. I mean, the central teams, there will still be central teams that at least set policy. In some cases, they might do best practice, they might do training, they might do tool selection, they might do secondments where they have specialist skills that go sit in one or the other team for a period of time and go back to central. So that piece I'm not so clear about. I think that's still to be discovered for us. Maybe
it will help in the same range of answers. We've talked about your partnership with the executive officer. Are there any key tech roles like a security officer or a data privacy officer at MADE, and how or you are having all these responsibilities as well?
I have all the fun.
You have all the fun.
Yeah, so I think that's because the size we are, the kind of business we are, it doesn't add up for us, for example, to have a CISO sitting at the exec level. That would be too much. So I have a head of information security who takes care of those things, but I am the voice towards the exec team of that responsibility. I think that's what you're asking.
Okay.
So at the exec table, I am tech, all of it.
And you've said some of the tech team is around 130 people. How many employees do we have at MADE in total?
It's roughly 50-50. So it's roughly 50-50. About half of us are employees, predominantly UK-based, predominantly London-based, now working remotely, more or less, most of the time. The other half is a mix. There's a big chunk of that is Pentalog. And then we have a handful, maybe 8 or 9 contractors all over Europe. And they're quite important as well. They're kind of the glue in between. It makes us have not 2, but many places, which makes us better at collaborating and so on. So I think the other thing is we try our best to not use geography as an organizational principle. So we're not about co-location. We're about mixed teams across geographies and across employee, not employee. It doesn't matter. I think that works for us. So 50-50.
Very interesting. And also linked to the responsibilities, when we designed the CTO Fundamentals series, we said something about, there's this character, Bob, talking about how not to fail and things like that, his journey as a CTO. And at one point in time, he discovers that he wants to decentralize and allow his teams to take decisions and all that. But there is this challenge in how can he ensure that the decisions these teams take don't harm the organization, don't endanger the organization, because you can, in a sense, that there could be no limit. How do you work with that? How do you ensure with you've talked about decentralized teams? How do you ensure that these teams ensure? What are, I don't know, 1 or 2 practices that you can share with us so that everyone may make benefit of about decentralized teams, autonomous, but they don't harm the organization in terms of privacy, security.
So to be clear, we're only on the beginning of this journey, right? We are, like most organizations, I think, something that comes from tech organically tends to cluster around technologies. People work together with people with the same skills, and their manager has the same skills, and that's how organically smaller tech companies tend to evolve. And we have that same background. We're gradually trying to get that more cross-functional and more aligned with, at the grassroots, with the business units, without going all the way up to a central roadmap and down again. That's the idea, right? So how do you keep that in check? One aspect is the KPIs that I talked about. If this works, we should see the KPIs move in the right direction, not in the wrong direction. The second is to make sure that there is still sufficient bandwidth in these teams for bigger projects that will come from a business transformation function or an architectural decision. So constantly optimizing for the short term gives you a local optimum, but it doesn't give you the global optimum. Sometimes you need to align things in time. It's not just tech, it is legal, it is logistics. A warehouse needs to launch. We need to, things, non-tech things, big non-tech things need to be aligned in time with tech things. And you can't just leave that devolved. So there are still projects, but the projects land on a long-term grassroots collaboration, which is largely micro roadmap. So they land on people who understand each other, speak the same language across tech and non-tech, have an insight into each other's short-term roadmaps. So when the projects land, they land in a fertile soil. They have a good chance. It's not just you drop that, go talk to those people that you've never worked with before and learn a domain that you don't know and work on this service that you don't know and stuff like that. There is long-term collaboration, but there is still central orchestration for some things that need to be aligned in time.
Okay.
That's what we're trying.
Very interesting, and it reminds me of a meetup that we had in France with the Tech Rocks community, where we had an amiral from the French Army, Loic Finaz, and he said co-working, pair working, working with developers builds also trust. Builds trust first, and that's the
exactly.
What can you tell us about you as working with developers, working with these colleagues, and it's not the smallest team, but what can you tell us about that?
Me working with developers, I wish I did more of it. So I'm a developer myself from a background, right? And that's still where I'm, if I was given a choice, that's still where I would be happiest. If I can be in the zone and get the satisfaction of doing something complex and seeing it come to light, that's where the fun is, I think.
Do you still code from time to time?
Occasionally I will write a SQL query or something. Yeah, I have a few pet projects where I keep a bit closer in case I need to let off some steam, right? In case I need to have another angle to my job. There are not many. There are one or two projects that I'm a bit closer to.
Okay.
I will look at code quite often because that gives me a good measure of progress, problems, quality, and so on. I almost never write it, and that's a good idea.
Great. So I will move forward with my question, and hopefully, Jonathan, you got your answer. And if not, please try again with a new question. I'll read it with the next occasion. Yeah. So. Is there any, I don't know, specific skill or I don't know, your organization is challenging on? Is there something, I don't know, lacking and more important that you think that can help others to be shared on the market, on the
Yeah, I think it's not so much that we're lacking specific skills. So nothing that we do is out of the ordinary. And I think that in itself is a challenge. Some of the things we do are reasonably cool and reasonably priced in the market, and that makes it hard to hire sometimes, right? You start something cool, you hire a few people, they learn it and they go on because they've now increased their value. Hiring is a challenge because of that, because it's at the sweet spot of not legacy and not cutting edge. It's where the market is, basically. That's where we tend to be in terms of tech choice. There are a few other things. For example, in our back office systems, we have Python as a language. It's a fairly high level language. We can afford that. Performance is not our problem, for example. So we can afford that, but we use that in a way which is more like enterprise programming, domain-driven design, enterprise integration patterns, that kind of thing, which is not common in that language. People with that language tend to do data or machine learning things, or maybe small websites or whatever. They don't have that mindset, which you would find more in .NET or Java or whatever backgrounds. So there's a mismatch in how we use the technology with how the market is a bit. And that makes it challenging to hire.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll go to the next set of questions about technology in general. Please tell us, technology strategy is business strategy, right or wrong?
The other way around. Business strategy is technology.
Business strategy is technology strategy.
Well, business strategy sets technology strategy. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and this is something that you live at your daily job.
Yes, yes. In our context, I can sketch it quite easily. Every department within MADE benefits from some tech, right? From whether we provide laptops or connectivity to offices in China or whatever it is, we support all the departments. But there are a few where technology is really part of our competitive moat, part of our advantage, if you like. And I think, so the product isn't one of them. The physical product, we sell physical goods, designed goods at a good price point. That is not technology. We can help design those products. We can help trace their sustainability. We can help source them cost effectively, but the product itself is the product, it's not technology. So technology there is not a differentiator, I would say. Where it is a differentiator is our digital experience. It's virtual in store. We are pure play online retailer. We only sell online. We have some showrooms, but you can't buy anything. So we sell expensive things online to digital natives. So our experience has to be top. It has to be pleasurable, smooth, fast, attention to detail. So that's something we jealously keep in-house and invest in. The other part is the supply chain. For us is asset light. So we don't own the warehouses, except one. We don't own the factories. We have loose relationships with carriers, with shipping companies, and so on and so on. It's asset light, just in time. It's very complicated as a supply chain. Taming that complexity is part of our advantage. So that's where we need to invest, hence domain-driven design and all that stuff. So we need to understand our business context to formulate that tech strategy.
And the entire supply chain is, however, digitized. Huh? Yeah.
It is, yes. I mean, that's the idea, yeah. So if you place an order on MADE, you could be buying things that are still being manufactured, that are underwater, that are in a warehouse, that are drop shipped from a supplier to you, that are pick and pack, so multiple items in one box, one item per box, or multiple parcels per SKU. So it's a lot more complicated than, say, a fashion retailer or something like that, where you sell only pick and pack from a warehouse. It's way more complicated. And so that's part of our investment, is in that kind of technology. That's all in-house.
Are there any areas where you think that maybe it was wrong for us to develop it from scratch and we should have used some sort of SaaS or technology? And is there any area in your infrastructure system?
I don't think so. I think we're quite good. Our default position is we shouldn't own it, right? So we are cloud first, cloud native, SaaS first, where we have a choice. And we see our job as knitting together third-party offerings, typically SaaS. We are only conscious of two things. One is encapsulation. We want to be able to make sure we have a single point of contact to that particular service or offering or vendor or tool, so we can swap them quite easily. The second is that we pick vendors that tend to be sort of medium-sized, so not the big SAP, Oracle, whatever, but not the tiny ones, the medium-sized that do one thing but do it quite well. And the third is that we're jealous about the data. We want to legally own and technically have access to all the data, because that informs everything we do. So as long as those three are true, we can encapsulate small, medium-sized player, specialist, we have the data. Our job is to knit it together. That's where the event store piece comes in, to bring it all together. So that's our default option. We will never build in-house if you can find this, except digital experience and the complex supply chain. So for example, our CMS is outsourced, our PIM is outsourced, and so on.
I hope, dear audience, you get inspired from these thoughts. And we have a question. Thank you, Geert, for that. Which companies have transitioned well to new market reality in terms of demand of customers and workforce extremely well? Are you considered inspirational?
Not sure I understand.
Yeah, I'll try that again. Which companies have transitioned well to new market reality in terms of demand of customers and workforce extremely well? I think, Lena, that we, but maybe you can talk a bit, because in a sense, what Made does, it's disruptive business, or at least when it started, it was. That jumps to the second question in the same paragraph. If you are considered inspirational, for example, in this regard.
Yeah. So let me try and answer. In terms of demand, I think what we're seeing is a shift to online, right? The shift to online is always there in every industry. It's happened in electronics, it's happened in books and so on. It's now happening in our sector, and we think that shift is happening, it's here to stay, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. And we are in a good place to capitalize on that because we are an online player. Many other businesses, retailers that have a physical footprint are finding it harder. Some will succeed, but they will lag behind, some will fail. That's how we see the sort of demand piece of customers. And a large part of that is, I come back to this digital experience, that virtual in-store experience. Do you have a pleasurable experience? Do you have enough trust in what you see in terms of imagery, dimensions, physical fabric samples that you can order for free? Can we build that kind of trust to make you buy things online? In terms of the workforce, I guess this means again, the pandemic and people's expectations. So we have, because we were largely half remote team with the mindset and the habits and the tooling to allow us to collaborate, shutting down the office and working from home was not a problem for us in the tech team. That was something that we could do quite easily. We've done that successfully, but people now have the expectation that things have changed. There's new ways of working, as we call them. So there is a lot more working from home. We are now, of course, the UK guidelines have changed again, but we were trialing a hybrid working, where we were basically saying 2 days in the office, 3 days working from home as our sort of destiny. That was a trial, a pilot that we were running until December, until the rules changed again. So I think that is, for a business, both a problem in terms of how do you sustain your culture, if especially new starters, younger people who start their career, how do you instill in them the values? How do they find their way if it's only on Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams? It's a hard problem. It's also an opportunity in terms of your talent pool. If you can do this well, your talent pool becomes a lot larger. And so we're finding our way. On both questions about consumer demand and workforce, I don't have any inspirational businesses to share.
But inspirational or not, maybe at least, because I feel there are still lots of questions about the pandemic, that it will not end, and maybe if you can share with us from your CTO role at Made, if you had any particular learnings that you could share with the audience, and then something related to HR or the executive side, if you something that happened at Made, but from your role, right, that can be shared with the others.
Maybe less than most, because like I said, we were largely distributed as a setup anyway. We had an office, in London and so on, but we were already collaborating in the same way, working with Slack and Zoom, and no, we didn't have Zoom at the time, we had BlueJeans. One learning was Zoom is good.
So you were working already remote, or you were ready to do it, in a sense?
We were already collaborating between countries all the time. So that's something we were used to as a tech team. We had, I think the habits are the most important things. Having the habit of making this kind of thing, the Zoom thing, work, for example. Simple things like muting yourself, or ways to create fun online and so on. We had the tools to do it. Other than Zoom, we signed with Zoom after a few months, I think. So when it came, it wasn't too much of a change for us. There's a lot of work on the IT team, making sure that everybody's set up in this remote world, and if something breaks, how can we fix it, and that kind of thing. There were some teething problems with some of the VPN into the office, for example, the bandwidth. Not for the tech team, because we are sort of mostly cloud-based and that doesn't go via the office, but the other teams within the business had to use our systems through VPN. Some teething problems. So our IT team did a lot of good work there early in the pandemic. They discovered the value, for example, of workspaces, AWS, so the Amazon virtual desktops, where you can quickly spin up machines for people. So if something breaks, they can have their own device, spin up a virtual machine, have all the security and access work. That was very valuable. But I don't think we learned too much, because we were ready for this world as a tech team.
Okay, and when you are talking a bit earlier about the staff, the people, tech, not tech, at Made you have only one HR department?
Yes. Handling
both? Doesn't matter,
yes.
You don't have something specific? Okay.
Yes.
What can you tell us about, I don't know, the excellency, the way you filter, the way you make the selection of your candidates, of your employees? What are you looking at first? What's the most important for you?
Yeah. So I guess without getting into specific skills or anything, we select by and large on cultural fit, but cultural fit with a diversity angle. So we want people that have enough overlap with our values and attitudes, but also bring something new, something extra, some other experience, some other way of thinking, perhaps. So we don't want to be in a groupthink where we're all the same. So it's a fine line between cultural match and enough diversity. I think secondly, we select essentially on team players, right? So for example, we will do a coding exercise, pair programming exercise, screen sharing, whatever. That'll be a technical job, but we're not looking at how do you do the job. We're looking at how do you collaborate? How do you take hints and help? How do you ask for help? How do you explain what you're doing?
So wait a second. Wait a second there. So you are putting collaboration and communication skills and attitude, personal attitude, before the hard skills?
Not well before. I mean, we will first typically do a phone interview where we sort of cultural match and why do you want to change and all that stuff, and are you eligible? We might have a session that is more technical, sort of wide Q&A, depends on the role, wide Q&A and so on. But for a developer role, there is at some point, there is a pair programming exercise, almost always. And that's the one I'm saying we're not looking for tech skills so much as looking for collaboration, communication skills. Because in the end, we don't want, single people who do fantastic jobs but can't work in a team. So it's how do you talk about what you're doing whilst you're doing it? How do you listen to us as we're explaining things whilst you're doing it? More than can you solve the problem?
Yeah. So the developer cultural fit. When you do the interview, you look at how if he reacts well, she reacts well, and things like this. Okay. Exactly. We have a comment there. Rockstar teams, not rockstar devs.
Yes, exactly.
Good, good. And once the people are there, so you've selected according to your principles, and that's great, and you have the right people. What happens once they are in your company? And with a focus of what's great and worth sharing with other people so that they can do it as CTOs in their companies, or something that can help them in a sense.
Yeah. Again, it depends on the role. There are many different roles, right? The product owner is different from a QA, is different from a security manager or whatever. But if we take developer as typical, or developer QA as typical, because that's the bulk of it, then we would, people would go through an onboarding exercise. There's certain things that they need to learn about. They might watch the last few tech team meetings, the last all hands meeting. They might familiarize themselves with the way we do logging into Amazon or storing secrets, or we have some repos that talk people through that. And then we would immediately put them in a team, in a squad, and basically try to get them to do a ticket end to end as soon as possible. It can be on day 2 or day 3, or after a week. It depends on how complicated the project is, but really immerse them into, there's no prolonged training period or anything like that. It's maybe a couple of days. You get a buddy that you can talk to and get information from, but you get into the team and you start learning by doing. You attend the stand-ups, you know what your ticket is. If you have questions, you talk to somebody in your group. You do your first PR, it gets approved, you promote to production, and we call out on Slack, so and so has made their first release. Fantastic, as soon as possible.
And so that's the thank you for sharing that. There's a question there. I will jump to it in a second. If you would be now a developer, a candidate for Made, and Made recruited you as a developer, you are onboarded through this process, and there is one thing that you'd recommend Made to, hey, improve that. In terms of my experience of becoming a better employee developer in the company, what would that be?
So I'm onboarded.
Yeah, you're the developer. You are going through this exercise, and there is one thing you'd recommend to Made to improve. What would that be?
I don't know. I haven't been through that track myself for a long time. I never made. I don't know. I think like most organizations and most leaders, we tend to underestimate how much people understand their own purpose and where they fit in to the organization and the plan. We talk about it every month or so, but we talk about it once and maybe not enough, and maybe not specific enough. And today I had a remark from somebody who said, we understand the company strategies, these 3 pillars, that's fantastic, but I've got people here working on the mobile app. Where does that fit in? There's quite a big leap from the overall strategy for the whole business that you can explain in half an hour, and I think we do a good job explaining, but then showing exactly where does this fit in strategically. I think we don't do a good enough job of that, and I wish I was better at that, and I could get my team to be better at it, and the business as a whole. I think it's important for people to understand where they fit in, and as a leader you tend to know and therefore underestimate how little people sometimes get that sense.
Wow, great answer. I will go to the question from Gabriel, which tends to be a bit more personal, and I think I love the question. What's the main driver for a CTO? Not asking about meeting KPIs, but on a personal level. Right.
So thank you, Gabby. So I don't know what a CTO is. I think every CTO is different, right? So I'll answer for me.
That's the challenge.
What keeps me going right now is I am, like I said in the beginning, the CTO is torn between two worlds, right? I am now in a place where I'm part of two teams, which pulls me slightly out of my comfort zone. I've spent my whole working life in tech, and in tech, you kind of know, even if you don't, well, I started in startups, so I had to do everything. I had to do the DNS and the security and the this and the that. And you kind of know how all these things work at a low level. And even if you specialize within tech and you're getting bigger businesses, you still understand where other people in tech are coming from. For the first time now, I'm at a place where I work with specialists in completely different areas that I know nothing about. Products and merchandising and logistics and all kinds of stuff. Specialists and generalists that I have to work with who do things that in a world that I know nothing about, nothing. And finding a way to collaborate with them and feeling their pains and helping them out and vice versa is both challenging and rewarding for me.
My opinion on your answers is that you've given lots of human-centric answers. Must be, I don't know how it is to work directly with you on day-to-day, but it must be enjoyable in a sense. And I think
I would say the flip side of that is my tech team. Seeing something, and that's ultimately what always has given me purpose in my job, seeing something build over time, being able to look back in time 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, and see how far we've come, technology, people, processes, how much we've accomplished, and how much more stable and scalable, and how much more tech debt we've paid off than incurred and all that stuff. So looking back and seeing that achievement and seeing people do things that they didn't know they could do maybe a year ago, but we gave them the chance and they did it and they built themselves. That is the other part of it. So in two worlds again.
Oh, inspiring. I think that's going to be the keyword of this session. I'm moving a bit forward because we are getting near the end of the CTO talk, and it's been such a pleasure to listen to you, and I think we could spend several hours more. Let's speak a bit about green IT. Sustainable development. Of course, now you are building digital products and all that, but how does green IT fit to your vision, strategy, and of course tech strategy? What can you say about sustainable development at Made?
Okay. Sustainability in general is super important for us, and I don't mean tech, I mean as a business.
Great.
You have to understand we're a business that produces physical goods, and that comes with a certain footprint, carbon footprint, plastics, things like that. And we ship those goods over big distances, and that comes with a certain footprint. So producing and shipping and selling physical goods is something that has sustainability angle, and that is by far the biggest impacts that we have on the planet as a business. Tech is tiny in comparison. So I would say in tech, and maybe even in lots of the rest of the business, the best thing we can do is to be super efficient. Efficiency cuts both ways. It's a cost reduction and it's a footprint reduction. So if we can predict the right amount of things we should be buying, and we can track them accurately, so we don't get cancellations and returns and all kinds of overhead costs associated with it. And if we can right-size our services so that they're cloud-based, but they don't use more electricity than they should, and so on. So efficiency, both from a consumer-facing angle and from an internal tech angle, is the best thing we can do, I think. The second piece of that is we need to, as a business, and again, tech and digital experience has a angle here. We need to educate our consumers about where our footprint is, what we are doing to minimize it, what are our targets for recyclable packaging, sustainably sourced wood, carbon, and so on, and make that visible in the shopping experience so that consumers can make that informed choice, as well as sort of encouraging the circularity. So we've launched a partnership with Give last year, which is a French-based business about kind of giving your items away if you no longer need them. So now if you buy something at Made and you are replacing something, we will incentivize you to upcycle that through Give's network. And if you do that, we will give a contribution of your purchase to a charity of your choice. So it's a circularity piece. Eventually, we want to be able to take things back and repair them and all that stuff. So it's education and circularity. But again, that's business with some tech support.
Oh,
I'm not sure if that's green IT, but that's what we got.
Everything is linked, but of course, green IT is a small part of what you said, and but what matters is not green IT; it's sustainable development. Huh? So I think you've given a much better answer that I could expect. So about green IT, I'm preparing a new CTO talk with someone in green IT. A SaaS platform for fleet management, IT hardware management, and optimizing all that in the life cycle of. Is there any question that comes to your mind that we could pass for the next CTO, the CTO talk?
Yes, help us understand. So when we talk about green credentials, right? We think, and we're not started yet. We're thinking about this now, which is. Basically, we want to be able to not have a third party come in and do an audit and says, you know, your carbon level is this, and this is what you should be doing. We want to understand how those things are audited and computed so we can start tracking in our systems what the various contributions are. It's this carrier, so many miles, the carbon is this, it's this dimensions and weight, it's this much plastic and so on. That we have it in our systems so that we can start optimizing this ongoing rather than have people come in from time to time and tell us how it is. Can they help us with this? To what extent is this outsourceable, really? We believe that the only way for us to do this properly over the longer term is to internalize all the measurements around sustainability inside the systems. Just like we would internalize anything around cost in our systems.
Okay.
Is that the right way or not, is the question.
So you've given us a question for that CTO talk, and I think we will start with it or somewhere around at the start, because I always start with the CTO role. And maybe there's also a chat that you could have together.
Absolutely.
Geert, I think for me it was such a pleasure to have here for 1 hour. I'd love to have you again, maybe in 1 year, and see how things are going. Is there any thoughts that you have for this wonderful audience about that we had today? What's that thought?
Take everything I said with a grain of salt, right? Every business is different, every time period is different, every CTO is different. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Geert. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Bye.
Bye-bye.